Thank you very much, Mr. Bolton. We'll never forget the words of one officer on January 6th, picked up on the radio. Does anybody have a plan in the middle of the insurrection? In your report on command and control issues, you found that there was no plan. The department did not have adequate procedures for coordinated emergency responses. Officers were not briefed in intelligence, and there was a lack of direction about what to do about the attack. You recommended that officers be given briefings at roll calls on potential hazards. Can you elaborate on what was lacking in this area on January 6th, how that's changed?
Thank you. That has changed in a couple of different ways. First, they have hired from the outside a subject matter expert for operational planning. As evident, as you probably saw the difference in September 18th demonstrations that we had up here just recently. The second, they have started attending intelligence division analysts, are attending roll calls, providing briefings to the officers, and as well as to the command staff, whether it be the sergeants and above, the lieutenants and inspectors. So they are now receiving daily briefings and receiving the appropriate threat assessments. In addition, every officer has been provided a government cell phone to be provided for any alerts on campus or recall messages that may be needed.
Okay. You mentioned this in your testimony, that the department established comprehensive lockdown procedures for the Capitol complex to account for various potential hazards. How would these plans improve safety in emergency situations? And have you received any response from the department as to how they're going to implement them?
They are in the process of implementing, they're updating their policies and procedures. In addition to that, they have started conducting training, making sure that not only do the officers on post, but also as well as the officials around have knowledge of the lockdown procedures. You need to have that coordinated effort if we indeed need to have another lockdown. Everybody knows how to do those procedures in a quick and timely manner so that we can lock this building down quickly.
The emergency supplemental funding legislation signed into law in July included significant new funding for the officers' access to equipment. We noted the need for funding for equipment in our joint report after finding that 75% of the officers, 900 of 1,200 on duty that day, were forced to defend the Capitol in their regular uniforms. Do you agree that this funding should help the department improve officers' access to protective equipment? What steps have been taken to address this issue?
The department has just recently purchased new equipment to include either replacement of those shields that we had talked about in the previous flash reports where they weren't properly stored. They are now storing them properly. They have the additional munitions now up to date. So now they have improved, and not only that, they have also conducted joint training for the CDU units, the civil disturbance units. So they are conducting the joint training and getting the equipment needed.
In our last hearing, you noted in response to questions that the department was suffering from low morale. Do you still see that as a major challenge facing the department? And do you have any comments on the department's effort to recruit new officers? Obviously, all the overtime, the repeated day after day after day of working would take a toll on anyone. And this is, of course, coming after having been through that insurrection, not properly trained, not properly equipped, not properly led. And that's what we're dealing with here, and we know what a problem it's been.
When you talk about morale, that's a difficult thing to pinpoint as far as getting a definitive feel for morale. That is something anecdotal that you may get from time to time with the thing. But I would say that their morale has generally increased or gotten better since obviously because they are seeing some changes. The officers, the rank and file, are starting to see that things are starting to turn around a little bit. The department is actively recruiting those. They have been filling the classes down to FLETC. In fact, they just had one just recently, just before Thanksgiving, that they sent down to the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center. So they are starting to see some improvement, but I think the officers are in that wait and see mode. They want to see what else are we going to do, and they do recognize it does take time, but also they are watching leadership and watching the community at large, how are we going to move forward?
Well, as you know, there's been a massive change in leadership, both at the sergeant-at-arms levels for both the House and the Senate, as well as a new police chief. Do you think that the selection of a permanent chief has impacted the department's ability to make needed changes? What issues, when this committee has the chief before us at the beginning of next year, what things should we be pushing for, in your opinion, and what maybe keeps you up at night that hasn't gotten done yet?
Besides having 2 kids, a lot of key things keep me up at night. Certainly having a permanent chief, that is one step move forward, because it's very difficult when you start and try to make changes when you're having somebody in an acting capacity, that those are important to fulfill. The areas that I have some concern still is two major areas: training, a training infrastructure, a proper one, and intelligence. Intelligence is still considered a division as opposed to being a bureau level. They have yet to hire a permanent director to head up the intelligence. I'd like to see that certainly position be filled with an individual who has the necessary skills and abilities to elevate that intelligence into a bureau level. Now, training, which we are be conducting, we've actually started our next job. It's not a flash report. It's our normal type job that we have with our annual plan. We are looking at Training Services Bureau from top to bottom, and we anticipate that report will be issued sometime in February. That we want to see training become the flagship of this department. Much like when we view Quantico's and the Secret Service's Raleigh Training Center, and you look at their org chart compared to ours, we're nowhere near close, and we need to have a Training Services Bureau infrastructure that is going to handle all the training.
Okay, thanks. I'll let Senator Blunt Warner talk about intelligence sharing. My last question, just Defense Department, relationships with the Defense Department, which obviously there was much help of our National Guard here at the Capitol. That has been drawn down. But as we look forward to how we have better coordinated efforts, if ever necessary in the future, any recommendations on that? That was a major problem as well.
I think a lot of that is going to be continuously have the training, integrated training with either be the National Guard, Metropolitan Police Department, and that kind of goes right back to the Training Services Bureau as the one that should be handling that and making those relationships stronger within the realm of training. So it needs to be a continuum. That's what also worries me, is that, yes, we're getting, like the Civil Defense Unit is getting training now.
Okay.
Is it going to be continuous?
Yeah, and I'll ask you about this later. I'll let my colleagues go. But part of this was, having the Defense Department on the ready and the soldiers on the ready to help us out. We ended up, of course, Senator Warner's National Guard there in Virginia, and other ones stepped in. But there was, in our opinion, some delays that were very costly. Senator Blunt.
Thank you, Senator Klobuchar.